Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, with us today taking a look at another one of the pinball games that the system has to offer in the form of Tilt as it was known in PAL territories, or Hyper 3D Pinball as it was known in Japan and North America. Interestingly, the game was first released in PAL territories in September of 1996, followed by a North American release in November of the same year, before finally seeing a Japanese release in January of 1997. It's worth pointing out that the title also saw a release on the PlayStation and DOS formats, and was one of a glut of pinball games that saw releases in this time period, with the likes of Digital Pinball, Pro Pinball and True Pinball among others all seeing releases, meaning that Tilt not only has a huge challenge in front of itself in regards to being the best pinball game on the system that I've played so far, but a monumental challenge in terms of having the quality to enter our PAL or worldwide Saturn Top 10. Like always, I'll be talking about what it looks like, what it sounds like, how it plays, how much content and lifespan I think it has to offer, and indeed whether it does have the quality to make one of our top 10s, or on the other hand is so poor that it enters our illustrious Saturn bottom 10. Once you come around to the home screen, as I'm going to call it, you'll realise that you simply move right or left to select one of the 6 tables, and then move down to view the high scores for the tables, choose between controller layout A or B, and finally choose between mono or stereo sound. Like always, I'll start with the visuals first, and you may well be able to instantly see that Tilt/Hyper 3D Pinball runs in the Saturn's high resolution mode, meaning that we have incredibly clear, crisp, sharp visuals throughout the whole entire game, whether you're talking about any of the menu or option screens, or of course the in-game visuals themselves. With the game using pre-rendered tables, whether you're playing it with a flat 2-dimensional view or the isometric 3D view, it means they hold up incredibly well all of these years later, and are undeniably the highlight of the entire game, with the text throughout the game being particularly impressive due to it being so crisp and sharp. The tables themselves are suitably varied from one another, each with unique themes such as medieval, gangsters and outer space, meaning that the game doesn't get boring visually, as 6 tables within a pinball game at this point in time was actually relatively impressive when you consider the likes of True Pinball and Digital Pinball only had 4, and Pro Pinball the Web had only 1 solitary table. Colour use across the tables is also particularly good, with the palettes being perfectly suited to all of the themes. You do get little snippets of full motion video as well on occasions when you lock balls in place, although this does feel like it breaks up the action somewhat. Indeed though, it is very difficult to level any criticism towards Tilt when it comes to quality of visuals for any of the tables within the game. Moving on to the sound effects and music, and I initially thought the game was going to perform incredibly well in this area too, as all of the sound effects across all of the tables are absolutely spot on and are of incredibly high quality and very well suited. Also, in regards to the music, I genuinely feel that all of the tracks for the tables are very strong, and once again they fit the themes of the tables incredibly well and are absolutely fine to play to as you try to work your way towards unlocking multi-balls or events on the tables. But this is where my biggest criticism of the game comes, as there are only 6 pieces of music within the whole entire game. In the large majority of other pinball games that I've played, at least anyway, when you unlock events or take part in a multi-ball, the music will change or pick up in pace, or potentially both, which adds a level of thrill and excitement to the whole experience. But unfortunately for Tilt, this is not the case. Unlock the multi-ball, for example, and the music remains exactly the same, meaning there is absolutely no increase in terms of thrill or excitement when it happens. And this cannot be underestimated, because in my opinion, in a pinball game, it really does affect the whole entire experience as far as I'm concerned. There is no sense of drama, no sense of thrill or rush of adrenaline, and no sense of excitement either. And because of this, even though the game does sound incredibly good with everything that's here, it is also massively hindered at the same time. But regardless of this, like I always do, I will give you some samples of the music within the game, because like I previously said, the music that is here is incredibly good. In regards to gameplay, it's very much your typical pinball affair. You launch the ball into play, you use the right and left flippers on the table, and of course you can nudge or tilt the table too. You can also switch between two viewpoints with a scrolling 2D view or a full table isometric 3D viewpoint also. Take into account though that when you activate multiple, the table will automatically switch into the isometric 3D view and will only change back to the 2D viewpoint once you're back down to the standard single ball. In regards to how well it controls, it really does just play like the majority of pinball games from the time period, which is no bad thing as it's responsive, and that's all you can really ask for from a pinball game. The major gameplay points really come down to whether you want to play in 2D or 3D, with the game being quite a lot harder to follow with the scrolling 2D viewpoint from my point of view, as you only have a portion of the table available, and it will scroll up and down quite a lot as the ball moves around the table pretty quickly, meaning it can be somewhat tougher to play the game in general. In regards to the 3D viewpoint, you do get to see the whole of the table with this, but it does feel like the top of the table seems like it's a considerable distance away from you, as the angle of the view is fairly low to enable the whole table to fit on the screen. What it needed was an isometric viewpoint like we saw in true pinball that fit the large majority of the table on the screen with just a very minor amount of scrolling, or perhaps slightly smaller tables that could fit on the screen in a similar way to what we previously saw when I reviewed Digital Pinball Last Gladiators. As it stands, neither viewpoint is terrible by any means and the game is perfectly playable, but they just don't quite feel right in my opinion. Other minor things worth mentioning in regards to the gameplay are the fact that sometimes the balls feel like they are travelling on a fixed path, with them going out to play the same way over and over again, and also the balls feeling like they picked up too much speed on the way down the table some of the time. You obviously have all of the standard pinball traits too, such as various events that can be activated on the tables, small mini games that can be played on the display at the top of the screen, and of course everybody's favourite multi-ball. And despite the issues with the viewpoints, Tilt is still a pretty decent playing pinball game nonetheless. Moving on to content and lifespan, and it's a typical mid to late 90s pinball game. There is no kind of progressive one-player experience. You simply have the 6 tables to select from, with a choice of 1 to 4 players per game, and like the majority of pinball games, you are far more likely to have more fun and longevity with the game if you are playing with several other people. If, like myself, you have no friends and you're a complete loner, the likelihood is that you will probably grow tired of Tilt pretty quickly. So like always, that leaves me with my 2 final questions. Is Tilt/Hyper 3D Pinball still worth playing nowadays? And does it have the quality to make my PAL or worldwide Saturn top 10? In all honesty, Tilt really does only have one major drawback, and that is in regards to the lack of change in music or tempo whilst you play through the tables, because it really does bring the game down a peg or two on the whole. If this wasn't the case, I really do think we'd be talking about Tilt potentially being the very best pinball game on the system, but as it stands, the lack of excitement and adrenaline is the overriding feeling that you'll come away with when you finish playing the game. That being said, if you've got a friend or two to play with and you're looking for a pinball game on the Saturn, then Tilt will still provide some short-term entertainment. In regards to it entering either of our Saturn top 10s, at the end of the day, it's just a pinball game, and I can never imagine any pinball game on any system being in the top 10 games that console has to offer, and that is the case here. By no means a bad game, and in fact very good in certain areas. At the end of the day, Tilt is just another game in the Saturn's library. Like always though, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone, and I always want to hear everybody else's thoughts on any of the games that I take a look at on the channel, which of course includes Tilt today. So let me know your thoughts down below, and perhaps whether you actually call the game Tilt or Hyper 3D Pinball. And like always, I'll be back in the near future with another Saturn review. Goodbye for now.